want you to notice that marriage always has obligations, doesn't it? There are certain laws that apply to marriage. One of those laws is faithfulness to the wedding vows. Now, where do we find the wedding vows of Israel? What God expected from His bride or from His wife. Notice Exodus chapter 20 and verses 1 and 2. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. In other words, I delivered you. I love you. You know, it's not because you were good, but because of my grace and because of my love for you that I took you out of Egypt. And therefore, now I want you to be my people. I want you to be my peculiar treasure. I want you to be my wife. But there are certain laws of marriage which must be obeyed. So what does Jesus then give Israel? He gives them what? The Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments are the law of marriage. It's what God expects from Israel. It's what God expects from the marriage. He expects His bride, or He expects His wife, to be faithful to Him. Now, we're not going to read the Ten Commandments. You have them on your sheets, and you've read many times the Ten Commandments. But I want you to remember that the Ten Commandments are the law of marriage. And by the way, you know, does God make some promises to His bride too? Oh, you notice several of the commandments promise a blessing if Israel obeys those commandments, right? And so it's a two-way street. God is saying, this is the law of marriage. So I want you to be faithful to me, and I'm going to be faithful to you. In other words, we'll preserve ourselves one for another. Now you say, Pastor, where does the Bible actually use the word marriage for what happened between God and Israel? Go with me to Jeremiah chapter 31 and verse 32, which is reminiscing about what happened at Mount Sinai. I want to show you that God married Israel at Mount Sinai. And He wanted Israel to be faithful to Him. And He promised to be faithful to Israel. But it was a two-way street. Jeremiah 31 and verse 32. Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt. My covenant which they broke. What event is being described in these verses? The covenant that God made where? At Mount Sinai. What did Israel do with that covenant? They broke it. But now notice what it continues saying. Once again, going back a little ways to verse 32. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt. My covenant which they broke. Now listen to this. Though I was a husband to them, says the Lord. What was God to Israel? The husband. And what was Israel? Israel was the bride. Unfortunately, God was faithful with Israel, but Israel was unfaithful to God. In fact, I want you to notice Ezekiel chapter 16 and verse 8, where God reminisces about the fact that He chose Israel to be His wife. Notice how God proudly says, you were mine. Ezekiel 16 and verse 8.